Hello, welcome to another installment of our Aquarium Online Academy. Thank you for joining us today on August 7th, 2025 at 2 p.m. We are live from the aquarium. So if you're joining us today and you would like to participate, you can go ahead and text live questions to 562-286-1838. Any questions or comments that you have for today's Online Academy, you can go ahead and text those to this number right here on our screen. You could also email questions to live@lbaop.org. If for whatever reason you're not catching us live, if you're not watching this on August 7th, 2025 at 2 p.m., you may also just email questions and someone will get back to you with some answers, hopefully in the near future. So thank you all so much for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about adaptations and all the different sea creatures and their wonderful adaptations that allow them to live in our ocean backyard. We're going to start off with one of our animal friends, the Garibaldi. So I'm going to step off screen for a sec. And this wonderful creature lives in our ocean backyard here off of Long Beach, California, in our wonderful kelp forest. It is also the state marine fish of California and is a beautiful, beautiful fish, very bright orange. Let's take a few moments to make some observations and please text those to 562-286-1838, the number on our screen. What do you see? What do you observe? Feel free to make any and all observations are valid. There is no wrong answer. See, as for myself, I observe that they have a heart-shaped tail. I kind of see a very faint heart shape. I'm also observing that they are very bright orange compared to their background. So if you have any observations, just text those on over to us. And before I go any further, I want to define an adaptation. An adaptation is a tool on an animal's body. Yes, adaptation, here we go. It is a wonderful scientific word that we use all the time here at the aquarium to describe lots of the features our animals have. So, the adaptations again are tools on an animal's body that they use to live in their environment. So, our wonderful Garibaldi fish has some wonderful adaptations to help them survive. One of them being their bright color. This showy bright color allows them to be noticed and they stand out as any bright color fish would in the murky waters off our coast and in the kelp forest. Now, if you want to compare this animal here that lives in our kelp forest to another one of our uh, fish, just like the giant sea bass that also lives in the kelp forest, we can kind of see and compare some differences. So I'm going to step off for a second. Take a moment to notice what is different about these two creatures that live in the same habitat. What adaptations or tools might they have that are unique? Once again, feel free to text in at 562-286-1838. We can answer your questions, we can interact with you, share some of those scientific observations. What are you noticing? One thing that I notice is how this giant sea bass is a lot more muted in their color, right? They look more pale. They kind of blend into the bluish color of the water. I also am noticing some subtle spotting. Oh, we have some observations coming in. One viewer noted that they both have fins, and yes, not only is color and shape an adaptation, but fins are an adaptation themselves. Fins allow our fishy creatures to move around and swim. Another viewer has commented that the sea bass have spots. Yes, those spots that you see on our sea bass are great for camouflage. The sea bass is one of the apex predators in the kelp forest, and even though they are giant, as their name suggests, reaching sizes of over 6 feet with a weight of up to 500 pounds. Yes, they are very large animals. And despite this, they're experts at camouflage due to their coloring and their spots. They're able to ambush their different prey by blending into the light and shadow of the kelp forest. Another viewer also commented that the colors are different. Yes, the colors are very different. While the sea bass likes to be kind of like hidden and they like to not be noticed or stand out, the Garibaldi, if you notice with its flashy orange colors and scales and bright blue eyes, it's definitely a fish that's going to stand out. So they have different tendencies or tactics that they're employing, right? The sea bass wants to be hidden so that they can hunt. However, the Garibaldi definitely wants to be seen in order to kind of protect their territory. They're more tend to be more aggressive, more showy, right? There's no hiding when you're bright orange and you live in a sea of green and blue. You're gonna stand out right away. And kind of the bright coloration of the Garibaldi is an indication to other animals to kind of stay away, right? Um, they are clearly visible and they are also very aggressive to match their fiery color. And so we notice that these two different tools, just the color itself, um, you can notice many differences in just their behavior and their coloration. Another viewer also mentioned that the bass looks longer and bigger, which is correct. The giant sea bass is much larger, several times, maybe even 10 times larger, or I would even venture to say a bit more. Then the Garibaldi. The Garibaldi is a fish that's only about up to maybe a foot long, if that, several inches long, not too big compared to the sea bass. Yet their personality definitely is very big. They have a very large personality. They're always bullying around different fish, kind of pushing them out of their territory, making sure they're establishing themselves, making sure that they're noticed. So thank you all, everyone that shared. Thank you for sharing and sending in those observations, right? So these animals have these different tools. Even though they live in the same environment, they have many different ways in which they express themselves and they're able to navigate that environment. Let's maybe look at some different animals and try to look at some other adaptations. Yes, this is our furry, fuzzy, and very cute southern sea otter. I'm going to step back on screen for just a second. Our southern sea otter lives off our coast as well. They're a marine mammal, meaning that being a mammal in the water comes with its own special set of adaptations. If anyone knows what they are, what makes marine mammals mammals? Why are they unique? There's five different characteristics or adaptations that these animals have that make them mammals. We also have them as well being mammals. We can start with the first one being the most obvious one. As you can see all along their body, they have fur. I have fur up here, just like the sea otters. And that fur is a common characteristic in all mammals. specifically marine mammals, right? They live in the ocean, an environment that's much different than what are used to living in, and so they need to have unique adaptations to be able to survive. Southern sea otters, even though they breathe air, another one of those adaptations for mammals, they need to have some special ones to be able to survive in the water, such as if we can see up here, we see they have these very nice long flippers on their legs, and they also have a tail to help them swim and maneuver, right? You can see up here they have little paws that they use, which are not flippers, but they have little paws that they use to manipulate different tools, right? Which is another adaptation. You know, being able to use tool is not a, a tool in and of itself. However, it is a useful behavior that allows them to hunt and get food without struggling too much, right? That is another unique adaptations that mammals have, is that we use our brains to kind of solve problems through using tools or different behaviors. So we have this furry sea otter, and what's very unique about the sea otter is their fur and how dense their fur is. The sea otter has some of the densest fur of all mammals in the entire world. You can, in an area as small as a square inch, you can fit up to 1 million hairs, which is very, very impressive. It is so thick and dense that only the outer layer of their fur gets wet. Technically, sea otters' skin never gets wet because their fur is so dense that the water cannot penetrate it. And not only does it provide that barrier against the water, it also provides uh, another useful advantage in that it allows them to stay warm. Southern sea otters live off our coast here in California, and if you've been to the beach, you know that we have very cold water. We get that California current coming down from Alaska and bringing us that cool, nutrient rich water. And in order to survive in that water long term, you need to stay warm. So that fur really helps to keep those sea otters warm while they navigate and dive for food in our chilly waters. Now we have some friends uh, asking some questions. We have some viewers asking why is their fur different colors? And that's an excellent question. You might notice this two-tone coloration. You have dark brown, and you have on the body, and then you have on the head, and kind of like the torso, you have more of a gray and silvery hair color. I've just recently learned this myself that this is called gristle, and it is due to the age of the sea otters. Older sea otters tend to develop this silvery and white fur on their head and like their upper body, versus the younger otters tend to have uh, the dark brown, more even colored fur, which kind of reminds me that that's another way in how they're similar to us humans. As some of us get older, we also tend to have that silver uh, hair on our fur, right? Silver color on our fur. So, thank you all so much for texting our questions to our live chat at 562-286-1838. Or you can also email questions to live@lbaop.org. So moving on with the different adaptations for mammals, we talked about the fur. We have the furry sea otter. We talked about breathing air, right? Mammals have to breathe air in order to survive. They're not like fish where they have gills, where they take the oxygen from the water. So they still need to come up for air. The second one, well, that was two. Three being that they are warm blooded, right? They need to stay warm, right, to regulate their temperature. They're not cold blooded like other animals like reptiles or sharks or fish. they need to regulate their temperature. When we get cold, we start to shiver. When we get hot, we start to sweat. And so these mammals need to also regulate their temperature, and that's another adaptation that mammals have that is unique to them, right? It allows them to be adaptable and kind of like be independent of their environmental conditions, right? Even if it's cold outside, maybe I could still be warm if I have the proper fur or adaptations to keep myself warm so I don't have to freeze out in the environment. Another adaptation that mammals have is that they give live birth. And the last one is that their babies drink milk. We mammal babies drink milk when they're born, not out of an egg. They don't hatch, but they're born live, just like us. And so those are the five characteristics they have fur. They breathe air. They're warm blooded. They drink milk and they give live birth. So if you ever see a marine mammal, just know that they share those characteristics along with all other marine mammals and ourselves as well. But now that we talked about what we have in common, let's talk about some unique adaptations of some different mammals. So let's kind of pull up a different mammal and see what's unique about them. Here we go. I'm going to step off screen for a sec so we can get a good look at our beautiful California sea lions that we have here on screen. And just take a moment to observe. Right, we have two lovely specimens here. We might start by comparing the two. How are they similar? How are they different? I see that there's one that's much larger than the other, right? So size can be a difference. And what do we notice about this animal that's different than our sea otters? Well, I noticed that these animals don't have as much fur as the sea otters do. They have much less. And that makes me wonder. So they're mammals, so they must have fur. However, they don't seem to have as much. I wonder if they have a different adaptation that allows them to stay warm. Because they also live off of our coast in the chilly waters of California. And they must have some way to stay warm. And I wonder what it might be. Their fur doesn't look thick enough to stay warm, so there might be some other reason. If anyone knows, feel free to text in 562-286-1838. Our number is on the screen, or you could email in. I know we have lots of scientists out there that must know the answer before I go into talking about the unique adaptations that sea lions have. So let's take a look at our sea lions. One thing I do notice is this lion has a nice big hump on their head compared to this other one here that does not seem to have that same bump. Now you might wonder, did our friend over here kind of maybe hit his head or maybe got injured, right? But that is not the case. So southern sea lions actually develop a sagittal crest, meaning they have this kind of like mohawk looking bone in their skull that manifests into this bump on the looking thing on their head. That happens when there's a dominant male in the area. So this sea lion is a dominant male, and they have developed this sagittal crest to kind of like tell other males in the area that, hey, like, I'm in charge here. I'm the one that is calling the shots. And they tend to be kind of territorial. There tends to be only one in a certain area, and this happens to be it. You can also notice that means that any sea lion with this large bump on their head is a male, more than likely. And to continue talking about their lack of fur, we have one friend that kind of texted in and said that sea lions look thicker, and could maybe that be the reason that they stay warm, and that you're on the right track. That is correct. Sea lions have a thick layer of fat in their bodies called blubber that helps to keep them warm. And this adaptation or this tool helps them to stay warm in the chilly waters of California, right? They, as mammals, they need to maintain a certain temperature because they are warm-blooded, and because they can't get too cold or else their body won't function, they need that tool. They need that adaptation to keep them warm. So that thick layer of fat serves as a protective layer to help insulate their organs, insulate their body from that cold water off our coast. So yes, that's a very good observations. Thank you for sending that in. Sea lions are much thicker, much larger animals, and they do have that layer of blubber. And they also have that in common with other animals such as whales. We have whales that are also mammals that have that thick layer of skin of fat and blubber to help keep them warm. One thing you might notice about the California sea lion is their solid brown color. Now, there's no patterns in their in their in their fur, which they do have fur. There's no patterns. There's just a solid dark brown color, and believe it or not, this is actually a useful adaptation that they have. It doesn't make them boring. It doesn't make them bland. It's just it's well suited to their habitat. Here we have a wonderful footage of sea lions dancing around a kelp forest, and notice how they blend right into the environment. That that nutrient rich water, those earthy tones that you see with the kelp are perfect uh, for their dark brown fur to blend in, to kind of like hide in the murky, nutrient rich waters behind kelp, in and around kelp, right? It wouldn't serve their purposes or their needs to stand out way too much, like the Garibaldi that we saw in the beginning, that bright orange, very noticeable. Notice how if you notice this one sea lion that kind of came in, if we notice there's a couple sea lions that swim into these darker areas over here. Oh, excuse me. Over here in the frame, you might notice that they start to disappear. Once they swim out of frame or into those dark corners of the water, they kind of become less visible. And that's what they want to happen. They want to disappear in the water so that predators that are out looking for a tasty treat, such as sharks or orcas, can't find them. And speaking of orcas and predators, sea lions have another unique adaptation that helps to help them survive and evade these predators. You might notice that as they're swimming, they're doing these amazing acrobatic turns and flips that you wouldn't see many whales or other marine mammals doing, just because sea lions have rotating hips. Now, you might think, well, big deal. Why do we need rotating hips? Well, rotating hips are important. We have rotating hips, and they allow us to do many things like run, walk, dance, sit down, bend, squat, jump, all different kinds of movement that allow us to uh, move in a different way than if our hips were fused like a whale or a dolphin. So these sea lions and their rotating hips give them more agility. It makes them more agile so they can fake out, they can dodge and evade these predators as they're swimming. You know, they're able to do these very sharp hairpin turns. Even though they may not be the fastest swimmers, definitely are some of the most agile here off of our coast. So as you can see, there's so many different adaptations, so many different tools that these animals use to survive and live in our ocean backyard. There's so many different ways that they use their bodies to be able to live and survive out here. So thank you for tuning in. If you would like to comment and text, we have our number here on the screen. We're going to continue to look at different adaptations and try to learn a bit more about what some of these unique animals use to live in our environment. Now, here we have quite the specimen. We have a sea jelly. And now, taking a moment to observe and look at this creature here, what do we notice? It's so different from the marine mammals that we have been looking at. And it's different for a reason. It has unique and different adaptations, different tools. So take a moment. Let's look at our sea jelly and text in if you have any observations. What do you see? What don't you see? What is here? What is missing? What kind of tools do you think that they might use, right? Some questions to consider is how would this animal move? How does this animal eat? Right? Very simple questions that we can find clues based on the tools on this animal's body. So comment, text your questions or comments to 562-286-1838. One thing I do notice about this animal, this beautiful creature, is that I don't see a face anywhere on here. Do you? I don't see a face. They seem to be just faceless creatures. I don't see any arms, legs, so nothing recognizable from the marine mammals. So it's completely different creature. Some a viewer texted in noticing that they're orange. Yes, they can come in many different colors. Some of them being orange. Another viewer mentioned that they use tentacles. Yeah, you can see they have these very long, stringy appendages. They have two different kinds that I'm noticing. They have these thinner, darker ones right here, coming all the way down, dragging way below the jelly. And then we have another one that's more white, kind of more lacy, thicker, kind of shorter as well. And so, oh, here we have a wonderful shot of the differences in these tentacles. And so, like I mentioned, the thinner, darker ones, those are going to be the stinging tentacles, right? And these sea jellies use those tentacles to get food. They use their stingers and sting whatever plankton or little animal comes across their path, and they sting it, and then those long, lacy, white tendrils that we see are the oral arms that they use to move that food up into their stomachs. So, thank you so much for joining us today as we explore the many, many different adaptations that our wonderful sea creatures have and allow them to live in our ocean backyard. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure hanging out with you all and answering your questions. Uh, please join us next time as we do another installment of Aquarium Online Academy. Until next time, I'll see you.